Unfortunately, this sort of tragedy is all too common. It doesn't get any easier to talk to your kids about mass shootings or any other tragic event. Of course, we've had natural disasters as well.
And we wanted to bring in some local voices here at this noon hour to talk about them, about concerns, and about talking to our children. Here with us today, Dr. Bruce Polson from Primary Children's Hospital here in Salt Lake. Dr. Polson, thanks so much for being here. First of all, we do appreciate it. Oftentimes we talk about, in the wake of tragedy, how do we begin to tackle such a difficult subject with our children?
Right. I think one of the important things that we need to remember is that children look to their parents, they look to adults for information about how to respond to trauma, and so I think there are things that we can do as parents, both ourselves individually as well as things that can be helpful to our kids that can make a difference.
What would you consider to be age-appropriate conversations? I mean, I'm assuming with smaller children, you wouldn't necessarily have this type of conversation, but as they get older, you would.
Right. I think young children, so preschool age on up to maybe the middle of elementary school, really we should provide basic information about what happened and really limit their exposure to media. That's actually really important. That's something that any of us can do for young kids. They need to feel reassured. They need to feel safe. I think for older children and adolescents, we can have a more complicated, complex conversation about even things like gun control and things like that. But I think taking development into account is really important.
And how much is too much? Because the cable news world, and in many cases what we see now on network news, we will see a story take center stage for days at a time and practically around the clock. Where is that line for those more older children?
Well, I actually think we can draw that line at by recognizing that really too much exposure for any of us, including adults,
right,
is not helpful. And so I think anything that we can do to limit how much exposure kids are getting is important. And recognizing, too, that in this day and age, their exposure to media is coming through Snapchat stories and on their Twitter feed and everything else. And so there is going to be a lot of exposure that they'll have.
So the television may not be on, but their phones certainly are. So they're seeing that.
And we can turn the TV off.
We can turn the TV.
That would be my point.
And perhaps even take away the phones, or at least limit what they're looking at for the time being as we kind of roll through these really tragic circumstances, and be able to sit down and speak with our kids directly about what happened. I don't want them to learn secondhand.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. And I think that talking with our kids and listening to what they have to say is really important. And for younger children, preschool age children, it may be helpful for them to draw how they're feeling, and that may, any way that they can give some expression to what they've heard about or what they've seen.
That's wonderful, and I know you've written extensively about this particular subject in Psychology Today. If you'd like to check it out, I took a peek at it earlier as a father of a young child, and where you begin that process. It's fascinating reading. Thank you very much for coming in. Dr. Bruce Polson with Primary Children's Hospital.